Welcome back. So Canadian Grand Prix qualifying just finished. So pretty excellent session with both intermediate soft tires and wet tires all being used. So let's get started right away. So in Q1, rain in qualifying for the second straight year. Of course, last year it was Alonso on the front row with Verstappen on pole. In the opening 2 minutes, Zhou lost drive. So issues with his car already very early in the session, and he was stopped at turn 7 and it brought out the red flag. However, he was able to get going. Lots of drivers struggling at turn 1, and there's a bunch of replays as well that we saw, including drivers like De Vries, among others. So the red flag ends and Joe comes out, so they're able to fix whatever was wrong with his car. Drivers are constantly setting lap times. It's not push lap, slow lap, push lap, slow lap, and then even coming back in, because they know that when it's wet, the times can constantly be dropping as the track improves. So with 7 minutes left, the bottom 5 were Bottas, Sargent, Russell, Zhou, De Vries, and Bottas. Tsunoda seems to impede Leclerc on a hot lap, and Sainz also manages to impede 2 cars at the final corner at once. And I think Gasly was one of those 2 cars. Tsunoda, Gasly, De Vries, Sargent, and Zhou were all out of Q1, so a bit of a surprise there for Gasly in the Alpine. Probably expected to at least get into Q2, given the pace of that car in the dry. Your top 5 after Q1, of course, not important, but Verstappen, Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, and Leclerc. So into Q2, and the track was starting to dry out a little bit more. And Russell and Leclerc both wanted to go on slick tires right away. And according to Ferrari, rain was coming in about 6 to 7 minutes, so it was about a bit touch and go about being able to get a time on the softer tires if they were going to do that. Stroll spins towards turn 6 and he taps the wall on the inside of the corner with his front wing, so maybe a bit of damage there. Verstappen goes for softs, and Norris and Albon were already on softs at that point. And Albon sets the fastest time on the soft tires, showing that at that moment, the soft tires were the best tires to be on. And at this point, drivers are gradually starting to switch to softs, and the last drivers to switch were actually the Mercedes, which I'm not surprised. They've always been very cautious with their strategy calls. And Stroll, I guess, was trying to set a time and get his confidence back up on the inter tires. Rain was starting to intensify though, so it was really touch and go for those drivers, especially the Mercedes and Stroll. Leclerc was given a black and white flag for track limits, basically cutting the track too many times, which I don't think I've ever seen that in a qualifying session, but nonetheless not great for Leclerc. Ocon is then looks like he's impeded by Stroll. I was seeing others saying that he was actually on a fast lap and he was just struggling a lot with the tires, so it's not entirely clear what's going to happen there. And at the end of the session, Leclerc was borderline irate, screaming on the radio that the tires were not ready. So really struggling and a bit of a rough session there for Leclerc, as we'll get to. Bottom 5 were Leclerc, Perez, Stroll, Magnussen, and Bottas. So big shock there, 3 big drivers, or at least 3 drivers that should be getting into Q3, and those are Leclerc, of course, Leclerc, Perez, and Stroll. So another really tough qualifying session for Perez. Third session in a row where something's kind of gone wrong. So it'll be interesting to see how we can recover tomorrow. Top 5 were Albon, Verstappen, Norris, Piastri, and Alonso. So Albon really capitalizing on getting that early lap in on the soft tires. Into Q3 we go, and the conditions are getting worse and worse. So I wrote that, again, setting an early lap would be really, really crucial to setting the grid for tomorrow's race. They were showing Verstappen's on board, and he was really, really struggling under traction, but that's kind of how he drives. He'll always go drive a little bit faster, and he always has confidence in himself that he can control the car when it's oversteering like that. And he sets the benchmark of a 1:27.059, which was about 2/10 faster than Alonso's time, who set his immediately after. And at this point, all the drivers had set at least 1 lap time, but the visibility was getting a lot worse, and it was quite poor. Then, right after I wrote that down, Piastri crashed hard at turn 7. So he kind of just was a bit too happy on the throttle exiting turn 7, and he basically just manages to oversteer, and he kind of goes rear first into the wall at the exit of turn 7, so bringing out the red flag. However, right before that red flag dropped, Verstappen had already set a new time, and Hulkenberg, about half a second before the red flag comes out, he sets a time that goes P2 in the Haas. So fantastic time for Hulkenberg. And Alonso comes on the radio after the red flag saying he doesn't think people will improve, and I kind of had to agree with him. The conditions were getting worse and worse, and generally we've seen, like at Brazil last year, that generally when these conditions start to get worse, it's very, very hard. It takes a very long time for that trend to reverse. So Verstappen comes in the pits with 5 minutes left. Clearly he doesn't think that anyone will be able to set any faster times, and he is proving correct. So his pole position time for Max Verstappen was a 1:25.858, and Hulkenberg really shock P2 for him. Great job for him in the Haas, and he was 1.244 seconds behind. So great job there by Verstappen to set the pole time, and great job as well by Hulkenberg. So let's go down and look at the provisional grid for tomorrow's race. Of course, I expect some penalties tomorrow, especially for Sainz and Tsunoda, so this will probably change. But your grid is first Verstappen, second Hulkenberg, third Alonso, fourth Hamilton, fifth Russell, sixth Ocon, seventh Norris, 8 Sainz, 9th Piastri, 10th Albon. Didn't sled a lap in Q3, not sure why, maybe ran out of tires, or I think he did have an issue on one of his one lap they went on before the red flag. So possible they just didn't bother saying a time because he realized he wasn't going to set a time that was going to get him higher. 11th Leclerc, 12th Perez, 13th Stroll. I'm really curious to know how that group of 3 drivers improves and how far up the order they'll get. I think it's hard to say because we haven't really had a much dry long running. So I'm not really sure what to expect for Perez tomorrow. I would expect about P5, P6, maybe P4 or P3, but it really depends on how much of a gap the Red Bull has on the other cars around it, like the Aston, the Ferrari, and the Mercedes. It also depends on how hard overtaking is and how effective DRS is tomorrow, assuming it is dry. P14 Magnussen, P15 Bottas, 16 Tsunoda. I expect a good penalty for him. 17th Gasly, another disappointing one. The Alpine is not really good enough, so I don't really expect points for him, but he should still be able to get his way up, probably maybe 10th, 11th, 12th, maybe if he's fortunate. 18th DeVries, 19th Sargent, and 20th Show. So that's all for the Canadian Grand Prix qualifying. Of course, the race is tomorrow. We have a pretty mixed up grid, a pretty interesting grid, so it'll be interesting to see. So thank you so much for watching. Please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Who is your standout driver of qualifying? For me, it would be Verstappen with excellent pole lap and Hulkenberg in P2. So that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.